At first light on October 3-4, 2025, a new chapter in the naval war quietly opened. Across a cold ribbon of inland water and coastal bay, small, inexpensive unmanned systems once again did what expensive ships and layered defenses could not. They found, pressured, and helped disable a modern missile corvette. The headlines that followed were blunt and almost brutal in their arithmetic. A platform that cost tens of millions of dollars, fielded by a great power's navy, was left crippled by weapons that cost a tiny fraction of that sum. For analysts and commanders, the symbolism cut to the bone. Cost matters, but vulnerability matters more. The story is not merely about one strike. It is about the way asymmetric tools and creative tactics are reordering the rules of maritime power. The vessel at the center of the most recent claims is a Buyan-M class small missile ship, a compact, shallow-draft corvette designed to operate close to coasts and rivers and to launch caliber cruise missiles at long ranges. These ships have been headline makers before. In earlier years, they were used to project power into Ukraine by launching cruise missiles from relatively sheltered littoral waters. That capability is precisely why Ukrainian commanders have focused on them. Removing one such ship reduces an adversary's ability to strike inland targets and complicates enemy operational planning. Ukraine's military and special operations sources have now publicly claimed damage to at least one Buyan-M vessel in a strike that they say hit engineering spaces and reduced the ship's ability to maneuver and launch missiles. Those claims were published online by multiple outlets reporting on Ukrainian statements. This latest claim did not arrive out of nowhere. Over the summer, Ukrainian intelligence and strike units have increasingly targeted Russian naval assets in the Black Sea and adjacent waters, reporting hits on Buyan-M corvettes and other surface ships. In late August 2025, Ukraine's defense intelligence released footage and statements alleging that a Buyan-M was struck in the Sea of Azov. The operation was framed as a joint intelligence and drone effort meant to degrade the ship's radar and missile systems. Independent maritime observers and specialized outlets tracked these claims closely, and analysts pointed out a pattern. Small, coastal ships working alone or without robust escort were being probed, and, in several instances, reportedly struck by Ukrainian forces. That pattern, if it holds, forces the Russian Navy to rethink routine patrols near contested coastlines. Whatever the precise mechanics of the most recent engagement, and there remain gaps between claims, denials, and independent verification, a few facts are clear and consequential. First, Ukrainian forces have increasingly demonstrated the will and the technical ability to project effects at sea with unmanned and modified systems. Second, Russia has repeatedly reported losses or damage to small surface platforms and has at times altered patrol patterns in response. Third, these engagements are not isolated theatrical incidents. They are part of a broader campaign to blunt the missile threat originating from Russian coastal assets, a campaign that mixes electronic surveillance, long-range sensors, and unmanned strike systems. The accumulation of these events has strategic consequences far beyond each tactical hit. They compel changes in how littoral warfare is organized and defended. The strategic logic for Ukraine is straightforward but ruthless in its clarity. A single-caliber missile, or multiple calibers launched in coordination, can have outsized effect on civilian infrastructure and logistics deep inside Ukraine. A Buyan-M or similar platform that carries such missiles is therefore a force multiplier for Moscow. If Kyiv can find, pressure, or degrade that platform before it ever launches, it has neutralized a high-value threat without trading away equal value. That is the appeal of asymmetric tools. They maximize defensive returns while minimizing cost. For Ukraine, the calculus is existential. For Russia, it is a call to harden defenses and to accept the trade-offs of operating further from shore or always under heavier escort. The human side of these skirmishes is often overlooked in the technical argument. Think of the sailors on board, technicians, gunners, captains who, one morning, find their radar damaged, their pumps failing, and their ship limping toward port with a list. Think of the teams on the other side who, after days or weeks of surveillance and preparation, watch a tiny platform achieve a strategic effect. The stories are visceral. A captain wrestling with options to save his vessel while crews pump out water. An intelligence analyst watching satellite imagery and field footage that confirms a target's vulnerability. A small warehouse in a coastal town spared because a missile platform could not reach it. These are not abstractions. They are the lived consequences of a new naval reality. It is also essential to stress the caveats. Claims made during intense conflict often carry the scent of propaganda and carefully staged disclosure. Ukrainian authorities have every incentive to publicize successes. Russian sources have reasons to minimize or omit setbacks. Independent confirmation through satellite imagery, AIS data, neutral third-party observers, or corroborating videos from multiple geolocated sources remains the gold standard. In the case of recent Buyan-M reports, independent outlets and maritime analysts have noted Ukrainian statements and satellite corroboration in some cases, but complete operational logs and shipboard damage assessments published by neutral inspectors are rare. That cautious posture does not negate the pattern. It does, however, demand that narrators and journalists retain a scrupulous tone. Ukrainian sources say, reports suggest, and independent analysts observed are safer ways to describe these events for your viewers. Why do these strikes feel like a turning point? Because they expose a vulnerability baked into modern naval design. The reliance on sensors, automated fire control, and integrated networks. A ship is only as effective as its situational awareness. If its primary sensors are degraded, whether by electronic attack, physical damage, or environmental interference, its high-end missile systems become harder to use effectively. Close-in weapon systems that are designed to react at very short notice depend on accurate targeting cues. If those cues are denied, a ship with a potent missile magazine can become, temporarily, a powerless hulk. Modern navies have known this for decades. The novelty here is the cheapness and accessibility of the means to deny those cues to a major power. That cheapness matters politically and operationally. If an adversary can impose real costs with low-cost tools, the math of deterrence shifts. Defending against swarms of small, low-signature unmanned systems requires rethinking doctrine, investing in new sensors and counter-UAV systems, and changing operating patterns, all costly and time-consuming. For a navy used to projecting power with missiles and guns, the pivot to a persistent, layered anti-drone posture is disruptive. It dilutes offensive punch and forces a reallocation of precious hulls and escort vessels to defensive tasks. But Russia will not remain static. The pattern of reported strikes has already led to observable changes. Increased escort presence for high-value units, revised transit routes further from shore, and a heavier emphasis on layered air and electronic defenses in coastal waters. Those adaptations are precisely the cost Ukraine hopes to force. Every additional escort, faster transit route, or hardened sensor array consumes budget, crew, and time resources that cannot simultaneously be used to sustain offensive operations. One of Ukraine's strategic bets is that attritional pressure of this kind will accumulate advantage over time. International reaction adds another layer. NATO maritime commands and regional navies watch these trends closely. Several NATO partners have publicly expressed concern about the security of merchant traffic in contested littoral zones and have accelerated interest in counter-drone defenses for ports, harbors, and coastal approaches. At the same time, this conflict is teaching hard lessons to states that have historically relied on big ships as unassailable symbols of naval power. Training programs, acquisition priorities, and doctrine reviews across multiple navies now routinely include scenarios where small unmanned systems present existential risks to larger surface combatants. We should also look at the technical evolution without descending into how-to detail. Drones and unmanned munitions have matured better sensors, longer endurance, improved guidance, and more flexible command architectures. Operators blend open-source imagery, commercial satellite snapshots, shore-based electro-optical systems, and long-range reconnaissance assets to build a composite picture of a ship's routine and vulnerabilities. Once a window opens, small, agile strike systems can exploit it. The essence of this transformation is not a single miracle weapon, but the combined effect of improved reconnaissance, cheaper strike platforms, and more intelligent mission planning. There is an economic narrative too. In war, economics and capability interact. If one side can force the other to spend millions more per patrol, or to retire platforms prematurely because they are too vulnerable, the balance of resources changes. A navy that must escort every coastal corvette with a frigate and a helicopter loses the capacity to mass fires elsewhere. In simple math, where a drone costs a few $1,000s and a ship costs tens of millions, the strategic leverage rests with the side that can impose the most pain per dollar spent. Finally, the moral and political dimensions are unavoidable. Naval strikes, even on warships, ripple into domestic politics, debates over procurement, morale among sailors, and the narrative frame through which leaders justify policies. If a fleet is perceived as vulnerable, political pressure to change tactics may be intense. Conversely, if attacks continue to succeed, they can embolden further operations, producing a dynamic escalation that is hard to stop. So what should viewers take away? First, the recent strikes reported against Buyan-M corvettes are not isolated curiosities. They are signals that the littoral battle space has fundamentally changed. Second, the asymmetry between small unmanned systems and big capital ships is not a temporary glitch. It is an operational reality that will shape doctrine, procurement, and tactics for years to come. Third, verification still matters. While Ukrainian claims have been supported in places by imagery and multiple reports, careful narration must respect the difference between a claim and an independently verified assessment. And fourth, the human cost and strategic stakes are enormous. Disrupting missile threats at sea can save cities and lives ashore, but it also escalates an already dangerous conflict.